Hello, my name is Chetan Walia. Welcome to the webinar on quantum transformation. We have recorded this presentation because it makes for better audio and video quality. However, me and Rolly are standing right here and we'll take all your questions later. Quantum science is usually considered a complex topic with not very definitive answers into human mind. But we have tried to simplify that topic because we believe it's very relevant to the times and for us to come out of the times. So we've simplified this. However, the best way still to simplify this for your own selves is to ask lots of questions today. And at the end of the presentation, of course, and we will be here to answer all of them. Before we set in the process of quantum transformation, I think it's very important for us to understand what's happened in human history. So what we've captured here is we've condensed 2 million years of human history as if it was just 1 year. And it's very interesting. Take a look at it. If Jan 1 was the Stone Age, where all the hunting and gathering was happening, then fire was invented only till November 19. Then came the Strait of Agriculture, and that was December 29. And then came industrialization, which was December 31. In the whole years of human history, December 31, 12 a.m., industry comes into being. And about 11:05, 12 hours later, it starts to replicate. And from replication, we move to education systems that were built around to sustain the Industrial Revolution. And from this education system, we had extraordinary progress, but that was only the last few minutes. And now, as we are looking at human history, there's a lot of turbulence. And turbulence not just because of coronavirus. Sure enough, that's a very recent phenomenon. But there is other kinds of turbulence that industry has to constantly deal with. For example, within S&P 500, the lifetime of companies has shrunk from 60 years in 1960 to 16 years today. 6 out of 18 companies that were mentioned in Build to Last and Good to Great are only 6 companies are the ones that are considered great today. Those 12, some very popular names, are just merely satisfactory. Only 5% of the companies are able to produce shareholder returns in the top percentile. And that's the extent of turbulence that we were faced with. On top of that, we have this threat looming large upon us on pandemic. And the human intelligence currently doesn't seem to have an answer, specifically in the business world. Supposing this was to linger on for another 6 months, how would we react? How many businesses would be left? What would be the state of economy? I've spoken to many of you personally who are probably viewing here today and a lot of other business leaders. And I was speaking to these business leaders with the intent to interview them for these sessions so that they could offer you an insight. However, we dropped all plans of that because no one seemed to have an understanding as to what's the way out of it. And I think the reason why we couldn't develop an understanding or why our intelligence seems to be limited and we can't think of a way out of it is because we've been used to a certain paradigm which really doesn't provide the answers. And central to that paradigm is understanding of the role of conflict in our lives. Conflict is defined as between any two people, there are differences, challenges, forces, polarities, and thus conflict. Now, this definition has been culled out from commonalities of all available academic literature. You condense it all and you study it. This is the definition, or these are the words that you come up with. And let's look at this carefully. Our cognition or our intelligence or our comprehension or our knowledge is totally based on understanding of opposites. Right from our childhood, there is tall and there is short, there is good and there is bad, there is happy and there is unhappy. We understand the meaning of the word itself based on a certain opposite, right? And this whole cognition of ours is formed on a basis of a certain opposite, and opposite represents a certain difference in the way we will go on to perceive the world. Then comes, as we are growing up, the meaning of success. Now, right from childhood and again education systems, success has meaning only when you compare it with another person. If you are coming first, second or third in class, it's in comparison to others. If you're winning a medal, it's in comparison to others. In the business world, if you are getting a better shareholder value, it's in comparison to others. So success has meaning only in comparison. Your 10%, 20%, 30% market share is a comparative analysis. Profit is a comparative analysis. And comparison, of course, represents and has its own set of challenges. And then we, in our organizations, in our companies, in our countries, talk about value. Now, how is value measured? In my own life or in your own life, your value is measured by what you achieve in a certain dimension of space or time. And I don't mean it in the physics theory of space and time, I mean it very literally. To an average person sitting in their homes today and watching this, how do you measure your success? You measure it by the spaces you acquire, the properties you acquire, or the goals you have to live in a certain kind of an environment, standard of life. Or your family, most likely in today's times, measures it by the time that you spend with them. One of the two dimensions decide what value you are creating or what value you are providing for people. And these are the forces that one has to deal with. And then we work with a certain ecosystem where there are people around us, there are relationships to consider, whether it's at home, whether it's in our offices. We are surrounded by dynamics of different kinds of relationships. And we start to examine our own worth within those relationships, whether we are good enough, whether we are bad enough, am I happy or am I unhappy? And all these represent the polarities we're living with. Differences, challenges, forces, polarities is a way of life right from a person is born into this world to the time we would probably die, because our cognition, our success, our value, our estimation of self-worth produce these differences, challenges, forces, polarities, and thus conflict. And conflict is inevitable. Conflict, however, is neither good or bad. What's important to remember here, that this conflict is actually just simply inevitable. We are surrounded by it. The conflict is not good or bad, but it still determines and defines every single thing that we do in life. Whether I am happy, unhappy, success, cognition, value, worth, every single thing is defined by a certain conflict that exists. Your quality of decisions are defined by how you manage a conflict in your boardroom, for example. Your quality of relationship with your spouse or your children is dependent on not how you spend 365 days in a year, but how you manage that one day of conflict that you had, which defined the course for the next 10 years. Conflict defines everything. But conflict, and this is a picture of how it exists in our organization. For example, there is a certain external environment with all the dynamic complexities, other firms, economics, coronavirus, everything in it, and it presents a certain challenge. Within this challenge, we have the individual who are working to solve certain kind of problems. Now, how to approach the problems? Between two different individuals, there may be differences. Then we have the organization who has a strategy and goals to achieve in itself, and that provides the force for the individual to manage these differences and organize themselves into certain teams or communities. But teams between each other within your different vertical have certain polarities. You see, the whole structure of the organization and how we all combine together to get results is almost every single day just full of complete conflict. And making sense and coping with life is nothing but a paradigm that's operating in all of these forces, whether it's the environment, the individual, the organization. We all have certain paradigms or set conditions in our mind as to how we would cope with it. What is a paradigm? A paradigm is a consistent approach for making sense of the world and coping with life. That's the definition that we will use here. Based on our education, background, values, beliefs, everything, we come up with a certain paradigm. This is how we will manage teams. This is how we'll manage organizations. This is how external environment. This is how I'll manage myself. And it sets in motion a paradigm. Let's examine what this paradigm leads to. Supposing there's an organization and there are traditionals in that organization and there are challenges. The traditionals or the normal way of working provide stability, predictability. These are the people responsible for results. And then we have the rebels or the challengers who are coming up with new ideas, questioning. They're often in the minority. And if we plot these two on a graph, you get these 5 inflection points. And I want to examine this in detail because I want to point you as to how the thought process of the conflict actually gets managed. Now, there is a point on that side, which is an evolution point. Supposing the traditional story is the one that gets pursued by an organization and challenges remain in majority, the system will evolve. It'll become better. It'll become sustainable. It'll become strong, but it's only an evolution. However, if the challenges are to have their way, it will obviously lead to a revolution. There will be new ideas and new questioning and new minority. But look what's happened there. And if no one has their way, it obviously leads to stagnation. But look what happens between evolution and revolution. It's merely a distributive dimension. There is no real value creation. We moved from one story to the other. We moved from evolution to revolution. We moved from one opposite to the other, as we were talking about. But it's a distributive dimension. If these two are not able to even win over each other, then obviously it leads to a very protective, stagnating dimension and firms disappear. There is absolutely no big picture in this conflict of evolution and revolution. Yes, the world changes, but it's replaced with one thought by the other, and 100 years later, that old thought will come back and challenge this own very thought. There is no big picture that emerges. Big picture emerges when there is evolution and revolution, the traditionals and challengers together, not either or, they combine together, because stability is as important as imagination, and they create something. And that creation is the holistic dimension. It's not mine or yours, it's mine and yours, and maybe someone else's, and that is why it's called the holistic dimension. The other 4 black points that you see on this slide are simply old paradigms. And for the paradigm to lead to a creation, it has to be a collection of all of them combined with imagination for a big picture to emerge. You see, all of these points, whether you are the challenger, you have a certain paradigm in which you operate, you are a traditional, you'll have a certain paradigm, and you are a creationist, you'll have a different paradigm. Paradigms underlie almost every single discussion, disagreement, agreement, similarity, dissimilarity, conflict, peace. Everything is not determined by how skilled you are, is determined by what paradigm you are operating from. And on top of that paradigm, we build skill, knowledge, and everything else to settle our conflicts and to get our results. I want to get deep into what a paradigm is before we move into what a Newtonian and a quantum paradigm is. We said earlier, a paradigm is a consistent approach for making sense of the world and coping with life. This could be the knowledge that gets transferred from the family to the child, from the education system, or in an organization sense from your history to the newer people who are joining it. It's a consistent approach. This is how we will decide to make sense of the world. These are our priorities, these are our goals, and this is how we will cope up with life. That's a paradigm. Paradigm is a rigid set of categories which are infused in the mind. So even if there are challengers who are against the traditional version of paradigm, either they will fit in, or they will get out, or you will fit into that. Either way, for a system to function, a paradigm needs to be a rigid set of categories so that everyone can work in a certain way. If a person doesn't have that category, that paradigm does not exist for the person. For example, you might not be a doctor and I ask you to perform a heart surgery. You can't do it. That paradigm doesn't exist for you. A paradigm is deeply entrenched in unstated, untested assumptions about reality, light, space, time, energy, mass, and particularly in the nature of the behavior of human beings. Now, what is important in this point to remember, these assumptions are not known to us cognitively. These are not transparent that, oh, this is the paradigm we're living in. It's unstated, it's untested assumptions. For example, religion. Religion is a paradigm by default. Everyone evolves because they're told they're born into a certain sect, religion, caste, creed, or something. And we just adopt it without knowing the assumptions, without questioning them. It's unstated, untested. Yes, it's truth. Yet it's the truth for everyone. Transformation is a fundamental shift from one category to another. It is a shift from one model to another, a new model for seeing, thinking, believing. Change or evolution within a paradigm is simply gradual and slow-paced. It's not fast-paced. A paradigm, let's say a religion again, will evolve very slowly, if at all, over a period of time. There's no transformation possible there. Transformation or revolution is a radical improvement by shifting to a new paradigm altogether. And this is very important to note about transformation. We throw these words loosely in an organization. For a system to transform, it's fundamentally impossible as long as it's in the same paradigm. Within the same paradigm, the movement is very slow and gradual because the traditionals guard it. They're not open to change because that system works. So to change it there is a big Herculean task. What transformation occurs is only when someone introduces an invention, for example, where the whole paradigm shifts. Apple introduces an iPod and the whole industry paradigm shifts. The music industry struggles. Transformation or revolution is a radical improvement by switching to the new paradigm in itself. Now, we come to a Newtonian paradigm and a quantum paradigm. And please pay close attention to this. What is a Newtonian paradigm? The Newtonian paradigm is a traditional gravity cause and effect world. The classic situation being the Newtonian paradigm is completely structured and is quite stable. For example, this picture summarizes the Newtonian paradigm in most scientific explanations. Now, if you normally were to show this picture to someone, like you are watching it, you would think it's a picture of an organization chart. Sure enough, it is, because the org chart is built on the concept of Newtonian paradigm, which is that everything will have its hierarchy. There will be a cause, there will be an effect. And the reason it works is because it's so structured, easy to comprehend, and it's routinely stable. By routinely stable, we mean that it might have its ups and downs, but largely it remains stable. People in this paradigm, members, are highly influenced and controlled by their unconscious leaders or even conscious leaders. You see, your organizations, if the big boss or the big owner says something, it's usually followed without much questioning. If Narendra Modi says something today, well, everyone just follows, whether it's a lockdown, whether it's a demonetization, anything. They're highly influenced and controlled by unconscious and conscious leaders. Performance. People comply in the Newtonian paradigm without any major concerns because there is a system available to them. They blindly follow the system without much self-aware consciousness. No one wants to challenge and be the rebel and end up in a concentration camp, for example. So we will just follow, and that's the way we're supposed to produce performance. And the system, over a period of time, the Newtonian paradigm is like an autopilot. It works on a certain formula, it works on a certain set of systems and laws in society, and it's governed by that. But once the formula disappears, Newtonian system self-destructs. There is a formula to success. Coronavirus comes, formula disappears, we're in a grip, we don't know what to do. The Newtonian system has suddenly disappeared. Newtonian paradigm separates people from the objective, outside, physical and predictable reality. We know functioning within a paradigm. Once that paradigm disappears, or once that paradigm stops working, we don't know another way, because the people working in that paradigm were used to certain predictable physical realities which are no longer there. All objects, people, or anything material within this paradigm is supposed to obey Newton's law of motion. If there is a cause, there is an effect. Today, when there is an effect, we don't know the cause and we are paralyzed. Between realities, between different worlds, between different species, between different people, between different objects, between different masses, there is nothing but the invisible forces that pull them together. We abide by the laws because it works for us. But between these realities, there's no connection. You are there, I am here, you're listening to me. You are here because you are probably expecting, as a result of investing your 1 hour into this, you will get some takeaway. That's why you are here, plain and simple. There's nothing else that exists between us. There is no connection. There's no relationship. You're not inside my mind. I'm not inside your mind. There's nothing but a force of space or time that separates us. Everything else is cold, flat and empty. We don't have a connect with anything else. Today, when we talk about nature, for example, nature is everything. Plant, animal, species, greenery, sunrise, sunset, everything in our definition. But rarely do we refer to the human being as a part of nature, because the Newtonian paradigm has told us that it's meant for our use, or everything else is cold, flat and empty. Eventually, this machine of Newtonian paradigm, or the universal machine, runs out of heat, decay and becomes lifeless. That's the reality for all of us. It's based on principles of gravity, so everything must dust to the ground. Newtonian principles are principles of space and time, and it must end or evolve. On the other side of this is the quantum paradigm, which is essentially depicted by this diagram, which has no hierarchies. There is no leader. There is no person driving it. It's a connection between different people or different species or different elements. When Einstein was narrating the theory of relativity, it is essentially based on that he observed one particle, and if you broke the particle, they could be separated by endless amount of space and time, but one movement in one particle would automatically affect the other particle. How they communicated, how that happened was not a function of space and time because it was instant. The new paradigm, or the quantum paradigm, is based on a connection of mind and matter throughout the universe. It's not a function, they say, of space and time. Space-time is nothing but a string of energy within this kind of a quantum paradigm, that the communication is energy. It's not verbal. It's not a matter of covering certain distance at time. It's just filled with energy. And its expansion into the unknown. The unknown is currently not known, of course, to us, but visible forms of unknown are brought to life through people's self-awareness or through people's consciousness. By investing their energies and by being interconnected, if one person unearths something, it's instantly known to everybody else because of the nature of the quantum structure. And it's ever evolving. It's not based on the cause and effect rules. So everything in the universe in a quantum kind of a structure evolves in order to create. For example, Google and Apple try to implement a quantum structure. Google, I know for sure. Now, there are teams of people working out here which are just connected. They're free to experiment and explore and stuff. And everything evolves for them. If there is one person who's making a discovery in that structure, it's not that he hoards it and tries to make a patent out of it. That is made transparent to everyone else in the system and they're free to create. That is something that is called that everyone is managing themselves as well as designing the whole. And the whole is not an exclusive feature. The whole is a co-created feature. Learning and self-awareness is not a finite activity. Now, it's an important point. The Newtonian structure gives us education. For most of us, learning stops after education is over. For example, we might have a master's, we might have an MBA, you might be a chartered accountant, or you might have done your PhD. If you're working in the academia, might be working slightly differently. However, for most of us in our corporate environments, formal education and learning stops at that. We become experts, and now all the learning happens in that very thing. And then there is, of course, hoarding of knowledge and information and not sharing, and all those complex things goes on in our cultures. In a quantum world, the belief structure largely depends upon sharing and co-creation of the whole rather than any one person guiding the whole level of creation. There are no boundaries or cooperation, and there are no boundaries for commitment. There are only energies. The creation happens for one purpose and one purpose alone, that is creation itself. In our corporate environment, we create something with the intent to exploit it. In our personal things, if I have made a discovery, if I have prepared something, if I have come up with an idea, the application of that for me is largely how do I get the credit for it? How do I get the promotion for it? How do I get the success for it? And so I tend to hoard information, or I tend to hold that idea and I try to project it as mine. Whereas in a quantum kind of a structure, if you've come up with a discovery, it's made available instantly and there are no concerns around what this idea will lead to a cause or effect because the focus is in creation. Now, this becomes relevant when we study it as to what is the relationship of quantum and Newtonian worlds, specifically with respect to success and creation. Now, there is a Newtonian world on one side in this diagram, and the quantum world is on the other side. And we've capsuled four things: cultural norms, complex problems, assumptions, and group processes, which work in any kind of a culture to produce a certain result. For example, we'll be working in a certain culture. We'll be dealing with a certain problem, which could be the organization strategy. There will be groups evolving. The groups will make assumptions to produce results. And that's true for no matter what reality you're working in, quantum or Newtonian. Now, what happens to brilliance? Brilliance, essentially, we define as an ability to be able to come up with an idea or a creation or something that an organization can go on to exploit for success. In a very Newtonian world, where things are working fine, the cause and effect stable model is in place, where our people are working in a certain manner to produce a certain result, a brilliant idea, a brilliant mind, a creative input or an innovative idea is usually treated by members as a threat, or it's treated as an exception, or with an outright rejection. And there is a reason for it. The reason is, and that's a very logical one, it threatens stability. You are used to working in a certain way. You might be running an organization which is 10,000 people spread across 26 countries or whatever it is. If someone comes up with a radical idea for change, it threatens you. It's treated as an exception. Even though you might think merit in it, it has to be, and it largely would be rejected by people. Whereas in a quantum kind of a structure, if you came up with an idea, it's not rejected or accepted, but it's shared and transmitted universally for people to make their own sense for it. And the other side of it is success. In a very quantum world, the success is meant for personal gain. Now, I know a lot of people might be thinking, no, it's not. We are in it together and we talk about teamwork and all that. All bloody bullshit. Success is meant for personal gain. At the end of it, there is value to the shareholder. If you are leading a department, their success is your success. You are worried about your promotion. You are worried about your salary hike. Today, people are worried about a job to save because success is, in the end, whether it's shared or not, it's associated with a personal gain. Quantum world is achievement neutral. Now, it needs to be remembered that in the quantum world, you are not creating for success of it, and it's not some higher world or higher or lower world. We're not differentiating like that. People inspired to produce brilliance or to create something are achievement neutral. They're not really doing it for the love of how they will maximize benefit from it. They're really doing it. They just like to see how their invention pans out in the society. In the neutral world, the success self-destructs. There is a limit. The success decays. Like today, you had a certain market share, for example. Today it stands at 0. The success has self-destructed. Companies going on from S&P 500 from 60% to 16%, that's a self-destruction. Not that they've done something to self-destruct, but the success destructs itself. It becomes outdated. The reason it becomes outdated is because the quantum world is still producing brilliance and it outdates your success. It's called the multiplier effect, that one creation, I'm not taking credit for it, I'm multiplying it through other co-creators. However, both the worlds are important. The reason is that the Newtonian world uses the creations to create a success. Our organizations are Newtonian world, for example, and there is a person who's created something. What the organizations are good at is exploiting the creation. The organization or the person who's running that organization is hardly ever the creator of anything. Bill Gates creates Microsoft. He didn't create the PC. Steve Jobs capitalized on all the touch phone brilliance of his. He didn't create the touch phone. IBM capitalizes on computers and mainframe. They didn't create it. Xerox created it. Or some other person created it. It is an important distinction. Our firms fool ourselves into thinking that we are creating something extraordinary. Usually, there is some person or there's some individual or some entity creating. It presents an idea. You hear about it. You are very good at implementing it because the Newtonian world is about process and structures. The guy who's creating it has no idea because he's in a quantum structure. For them, everything is interconnected. They don't follow the hierarchy. So very openly, you will hear an idea, but you will exploit it. Our expertise in our organizations is exploitation. It's not creation. Even if you believe that it was your idea, you probably read about it in a magazine, heard about it in a book, read 10 articles and created a concoction. If you examine and you introspect and you look carefully within you, you've never come up with one bloody idea in your life because you're not in the quantum world, you're in the Newtonian world. Someone will come and offhandedly talk to you about an idea. You might not pursue it at that time. You'll see an opportunity. You'll know exactly when to push it and you will be able to capitalize on it because we are used to that Newtonian structure. We'll hear something and we'll instantly think, oh, how do I use it? And essentially, the Newtonian infrastructure and the quantum infrastructure has a connection to ego versus energy. And it's important to note, there is ego, which drives us to success, and we're calling it ego for simplification because everyone understands the word. The technical words are much different. And the quantum infrastructure relies on energy and drawing from energy or inspiration so as to create. There is an event or a crisis that happens, right? Now, how do we normally react to it? What stages do we go through to see how we react to growth or not? The instant fear that drives the Newtonian structure, or even any human being, let's say, is a sense of loss. Mr. Modi announces that India is locking down, and the instant reaction would be a shock or a loss that, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to my job? What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to the economy? Whoa, what about my cash flows? Oh, what about my purchases? Oh, I just did this. What about my EMIs? Everyone was in a loss or a shock. And then it leads to a certain bit of denial. Oh, nothing's going to happen. My company is going to take care of me. They're built on these values that they've plastered on the wall for 4 decades. They're not going to do anything about it. That's like a denial statement. Tomorrow your company doesn't have cash. You don't have a job, no matter how much you deny it. And then we see stories in the media, especially, of what's happening to the world. The media will propagate a certain community, put that on television 48 hours a day, and we will be full of anger. Oh, that's the reason why we've been subdued on why we've been subjected to with this whole coronavirus thing. So there's loss, shock, denial. We need we need a reason for anger because all of this needs to come out, and we are supplied one. From there, we eventually realize that even the anger hasn't really conquered coronavirus, and there is a second lockdown imposed on us. Now there is no more loss, shock, denial. There's no more energy left in the ego to do that, and it moves into sadness and depression. The fear tends to set in that this might be a reality, that I might actually lose my job, that my company actually might shut down, that something bad actually might happen, and it tends to lead to a situation of some sort of sadness. And then it moves into a state of acceptance. Now, most people reach here. That's not the problem. Unless we accept that something's come upon us, there is no action forward. So in loss, shock, denial, anger, and sadness, of course, we are paralyzed and there is no action possible. So the challenge is to accept it. Now, most people accept it. They reach the stage of acceptance, but they reached it through a process of loss, shock, denial, anger, and sadness. And the actions that are then undertaken are to overcome these 5 ego states. And what kind of actions does it lead to? For example, when you've accepted the reality today that this is the reality upon us, it'll have economic consequences. It might have business consequences. Most people are forced into thinking conservative strategies of preserving cash or of preserving market shares or of stopping purchases, or in a very individual sense of hoarding or going and buying ration for 15 days. Those are all actions emerging out of acceptance, sure, but out of still being in the states of this loss, shock, denial, anger, and sadness. The quantum intelligence tells us to adapt. And this is the action that is the hardest to take because our intelligence does not permit us. We see a certain shock, we see a certain danger, and we accept the danger, and then we act within that certain paradigm that brought upon the danger. In our minds, at least, the danger was brought upon by your imagination, that the economy will go down, that this will happen, that things will go wrong. You imagine all sorts of things. We haven't seen it happen yet. It may or it may not happen. And even if it does, when it happens, we'll deal with it. But the mind imagines all sorts of realities and builds action to prevent that from happening. No matter what you do, you're not going to prevent that from happening. So we start preservation strategies. The quantum world teaches you to accept and adapt. And this adaptation is what is not happening with businesses or with people today. Acceptance is, yes, this is the reality. Businesses are shut. No one is making any money. No one is selling anything and no one is buying anything. That's the hard, crude reality. How will you adapt to it? What is it different that you will do not to preserve cash or not to preserve your existing business because it doesn't exist? But what are you going to do to adapt to the new world? Adapt to the new reality, adapt to the thing that there is no demand happening right now, and your adaptation decides your future, not your acceptance and dealing with it there. What decides what results you will get tomorrow will be what you will adapt to and come up with today. And the whole cycle of loss, shock, denial, anger, sadness is called the doom cycle, because even when it leads to acceptance, the reactions or the actions that you will take will be within to overcome those 5 emotions, and they're meant to be doomed. How much can you scale up cash preservation? Eventually you will run out, and once you run out, it will shut down. Your only choice, whether you adapt today or later, is to figure out a way to generate demand, and that is what is called the growth cycle, the ability to discover the truth of things faster, so that you can move to adaptability. The quicker you move to adaptability, the quicker you get out of it. Unfortunately, cause and effect thinking is like a grip. It doesn't allow us to move to adaptation, and that adaptation happens naturally in something which is called a quantum infrastructure. The reason is this. If you examine the direction of transformation, let's say these waves that you see on your screens, let's say it's a quantum energy. Within a quantum infrastructure, the direction of transformation is you draw energy into the formal system. From outside, I see a reality, I silent myself, I be calm, and I figure out what I need to do to overcome this. But within a Newtonian world, The energy is drawn from the reality and transmitted outwards, which is what's happening to the world today. That we draw energy from the economic doomsday and predict what the world is going to be and send that out to everybody. That's the nature of things. This side of quantum infrastructure, drawing energy from outside, produces creativity, innovations, brilliance, ideas, whatever. It does not produce success. The reason we get stuck in the Newtonian process management system is because it produces success. We need both. If we get guided by producing success, we'll be forced to think in this manner. And the problem with our cause and effect thinking is we are always guided by self-interest and by thinking, how will I be successful or overcome a failure? And when I'm thinking like that, it constrains my ability to come up with adaptability. The only way of adaptability is to accept and not challenge the situation itself, but figure out a way on top of that as to how will I transform it. And transformation occurs in a different paradigm. It does not occur in the same paradigm that created the situation. The problem is we are trying to operate in the same paradigm that created the situation, think in the same manner. What will we do when this lifts? How will we structure ourselves to make our collections or improve the supply chain or preserve our... That's all the same paradigm. It's not going to solve the problem. Your problem is going to be a loss of demand. That same paradigm is not going to generate it. What's going to generate it is adaptability, because this success has decayed. Whereas brilliance multiplies. Can you move into the other paradigm of adaptability? And we'll just show you how. Move into that paradigm of adaptability so that you're able to succeed. And we go back to our previous slide where we were talking about the big picture. Replace the traditional and challenges with quantum and Newtonian. It's not that you need one or the other, because one or the other will again produce the distributive effect. What we need is both. We need brilliance and we need success. So you need to get the ideas and use the Newtonian intelligence or the process intelligence that we had to convert it into success. But this success will decay again, and so you need to move back into ideas again. We need both to function. Unfortunately, businesses have got stuck in the lower half of the success paradigm, and they're trying to solve the problem of a stagnation through the paradigm of success that they have. It's not going to happen. It's just not possible. To explore quantum brilliance, there are 5 stages, and the 5 stages are these. We call them self-identity. What makes me or the organization that I work for special or unique? That's how we identify ourselves. Self-competence is a question. How effective am I at being who I am? What value am I providing? Can I provide what the other people need or want? And are others benefiting from my actions and decisions? And self-worth is, can I be neutral to good, bad, and happy? And self-responsibility is who controls who I am, what I do, whether I'm good, bad, happy, or sad. I'm not elaborating this right now because I'm about to get into details of each one of these. This is essentially the journey to unleash quantum intelligence. As simplistic as it sounds, it's not easy to do. And this is the process that has been outlined by various scholars and researchers and books and whatnot, but this is essentially the process. No matter how much time it takes you to get there, this is the only process by which you learn how to create and how to produce brilliance. Self-identity, what makes me special or unique? And in all of these 5 steps, there are lists of questions that you need to introspect and answer. And what I would encourage is this, that you listen to this presentation, and you would probably need to listen to it again, and it's all available to you to do so. Get into your teams, get into your huddles. Instead of your mindless, useless Zoom calls, get into a huddle and debate and discuss threadbare each and every question. If you're able to answer about 15 questions that will appear on your screen today, at the end of the 15th question, sum it up together, you'll automatically have the answers that you need. And I just want you to trust me on that and go ahead and do this. What achievements, thoughts, things, people, actions, events have I associated with that define who I am as my essence? What do I consider my self-identity to be? For example, I am the general manager of finance XYZ company. Or do I value myself in the things that I have? I own this house, I own this car, I live in this particular locality in Bombay or in Delhi or wherever. Oh, or I have associated my self-identity as people. I'm the father of so-and-so, son of so-and-so, husband of so-and-so, wife of so-and-so. What do I use to define who I am? All of these definitions, you have to realize, have an aspect of decay in it built into the definition itself. I have a thought that might not be valid tomorrow. I have things that might be taken away tomorrow. The people might not be in my life today. Or there are events which are of yesterday. They have no meaning today. You might have got an award. You might be the best leader in the world. You might have got the EY Entrepreneur of the Year award or something. It was yesterday. It's over. It has no value. They had their reasons for giving it to you. It's decays. And the next question is, can I redefine my essence so that I'm not vulnerable to losing the things that are usually taken away? And things such as job titles, spaces, people, familiarity, events and stuff are usually taken away. What would you redefine your essence as that can actually define you? If you are listening to this as a part of an organization or a company, we define our success usually as achievements, right? That this company is that many $1 billion or $1 million or thousands of value in shareholding price or whatever. It's usually taken away. Today you stand at 0. So if that was what you're defining your success as, I can tell you what your success rate is. As on the day of listening to this video or watching this right now, you were a 0 because nothing exists right now. Can I redefine my essence so that the feeling of success, we're not talking about success out here. Can I redefine it in a manner so that what I feel about success is not vulnerable to things, people, places, and stuff? And when I redefine it in that manner, it becomes valuable to me. An example of this is, for example, what value are you creating? Can you define your success by value? If you were to define your success by value that you create, it could be for your customers, for your ecosystem, for your family, for your spouse, for your kids. If you were to define your success in terms of value, what would you do today? We are faced with a situation where everything is 0, right? You have defined your success by things, by people, by infrastructure, by capital, by net worth and stuff. So you are trying to restore it. All the bloody action and activity is in preserving cash and things that can keep your cash flow intact or your share value intact or your customers intact, because the association of success is with things. If the association of success was with value, what would you be thinking today? You would automatically be thinking, how do I restore value in my chain? How do I restore value in my ecosystem? And that value is adaptation, not the things. If your business was to able to come up today and create value, all your questions and insecurities and cash will be over. What is the value that you're creating? What is the value that the market needs today? Everyone is scared. Can you come up with what is the value that your ecosystem will provide to this situation? That is what is going to get you out of the situation. And our next question is self-competence. How effective am I at being who I am? How open am I to detaching my ego? And by ego, we mean a sense of loss, anger, sadness, and destruction from objects, and redirecting myself to vulnerability. Get over your loss, get over your fears, get over your anger. Where is this coming from? What good is it going to do? And who the hell you are to be angry at the situation? What entitlement do you have in life to be angry at the government, or angry at China, or angry at United States of America, or angry at airlines, or whoever it is? Who the bloody hell are you? How open am I to detaching from all this and redirecting myself to vulnerability? The situation is upon you. You are vulnerable. You shall always be vulnerable. And if you keep in the structure of ego, it's just a doom cycle. How resilient am I to change and transformation? And I get back to the point on adaptability. Am I able to accept the loss and move on? If the nation is locked down, it doesn't help to debate it for the next 1 month. What helps is doing something about it. We see people today who are focused on conservation strategies. How does it help you? How long can you conserve for? That strategy is based on an assumption that things are going to improve. Now, what if they don't? What are you going to do about it? Can you accept the loss? Can you accept that it's going to be tough 3 months? Can you accept that, yes, this reality is upon me, and now not react to it to control things, but react to it to overcome things? And that is going to happen by getting into the growth cycle of adaptability. How can I enhance my capacity to switch my achievement perceptions quickly and with much less pain? It's an important question, and we calling it self-competence because essentially the image of competence or effectiveness we have in our mind is measured through success. We are inviting you to a paradigm of measuring it through value that you create and not through success. Because when you measure it by value that you create, then the answers that you'll be seeking today are what can I do to create more value? And when you create value today, you will automatically be back in business because value creation is a quantum infrastructure. Value creation is brilliance. And for creating value, you have to move over your ego cycle of loss and anger and denial and sadness and move into acceptability and adaptability and believe that you can do it and essentially adopt a quantum structure where you're not hoarding value. You have an idea, you've got to create a structure where everyone communicates with each other and the value multiplies, and in no time you have a solution. And lots of solutions were discussed last time in our webinar on innovation. If you haven't watched it, please go watch it. We discussed it immensely last time, and we're going to again discuss it next week as well. Value. Can I provide what other people need or want? Are others benefiting from my actions and decisions? As a leader, and for all the leaders listening in, this is your question to ponder upon. Your question to ponder upon is not the success and failure of your organization. Unfortunately, if tomorrow, God forbid, you left with no cash, it's not going to be your fault. If you left with no cash, you won't be able to pay salaries, and so be it. That's reality. People will still respect you if you tried. Am I secure enough as a person to give what others need and not have regrets for the future? And it doesn't mean that I blindly take the opposite view of whatever my process intelligence tells us and start distributing money and wealth so that I become a pauper. No. Am I secure enough to give people what they need? People are scared. People are afraid. They're in denial and they're experiencing a sense of loss. Not an ideal condition to be thinking of an idea to take to solve the mess. Can I make people secure enough? Can I give them a sense of feeling and belongingness to create the quantum structure? And if that goes wrong, not have regrets in the future. Because if I have regrets in the future, I'm still operating from the ego cycle. Can I understand another person's worldview? Not just people, but the whole worldview. The worldview is we're operating in an environment of fear. We're operating in an environment of a panic situation, and that's the worldview. Having understood it, having accepted it, can I adapt? And adaptability doesn't mean to do something to strengthen the worldview. Adaptability means to change the worldview. I see this. I've identified it. Can I quickly adapt and do something to change it? Because when I do, that's the end of ego. I see a lot of consultants and trainers and facilitators, for example, and I came across this post on LinkedIn yesterday where I saw a very popular training company selling training programs, I'm assuming like these, for 500 rupees a participant and trying to make some cash. I'm not here to judge someone else's solution, but I thought to myself, what good can it do? Yes, you will get some cash and maybe one more month of cash flow requirements or something. Is it changing a worldview? And have you not inadvertently dropped your price to a level where you won't have a business left after the lockdown shuts because people equate you to 500 rupees? What good did it do? Can I genuinely experience and understand others' worldview, help eradicating the pain, contribute some value to it, and earn people trust and faith? Do I feel less valuable giving to others when I don't get something in return? Or is it automatic value which is wholeheartedly giving? And that's the growth cycle. And I want to expand on this question. The way to experience quantum energy, the way to experience intelligence that you don't have is not a question that what do I get and how do I get. It's a question of how do I give value, because that value creates energy in other people. If you change someone's behavior, if you change someone's happiness, if you change someone's mood from sadness to happiness, it inspires, it creates a different mood, it lifts the mood of your entire ecosystem, and that is value in itself, and that is the energy that thinks and creates a solution which is going to get you out of this mess. And a question about self-worth, can I be neutral to good, bad, and happy? This is something which is very difficult to grasp for most people. Can anyone at all will upon happiness? What is happiness? Do you define happiness with things, people, places, events? Oh, what is happiness? Can you at all will it upon? Can you train your mind to say, oh, today be happy? It cannot be done. It's an event that occurs as a result of other events occurring. You happen to be in the midst of it, you do. You don't happen to be in the midst of it, you don't. If you think that you can will it upon and you will do something to make people happy, you're living in a fool's paradise. And if you're then associating your self-worth with things that will make you happy, they have a decay value, as we discussed earlier. So that's essentially a fool's paradise. What makes you happy? Is it things, thoughts, people, or experiences? Because they're not real. Not in the very physical sense of it, but things can disappear tomorrow. Thoughts change by the second. People may or may not be in your life, and you might have experiences that you're again judging by the things, thoughts, and people that they bring into you. They may not exist, or they're in the past. If you're reliving the past experience and feeling happy, it's not only fool's paradise, it's outright delusionary, because it doesn't exist anymore. Today you're in a situation where all that's disappeared. Can I realize the momentary value of happiness and change my concept of self-worth so that my well-being is secured? And that is wisdom. Can I realize that this transitionary value of happiness, about good, about bad. I understand good only because I have an understanding of a bad. I understand happiness only because I have an understanding of unhappiness. It's all momentary. And this momentary things disappear at the click of a button today. At the click of at one television announcement, it disappears. And can I realize that this is not the concept of self-worth that I need to live with? And what is the concept of self-worth is defined by something that we call self-responsibility. Who controls who you are? Am I aware of my thoughts or emotions, or I live in reactions? There is an event that occurs and it creates certain thoughts in the mind, of course, mostly negative. It creates certain emotions, as we were discussing, emotions of loss, sadness, and anger. And human brain is wired to react to that, right? Someone comes and screams at you, most likely you'll scream back or react in some way or the other. Because your perception of self-worth in these moments take a hit, or it takes a downturn hit. We are so obsessed with our own selves that, oh, how dare you speak to me like that? How dare... I was chatting with a business leader yesterday, a very renowned business leader, over the phone, and he's like, how dare this happen to the world? Who the bloody hell are you? So self-obsessed about your own little cocoon of a thing that we live in, that we are defining our self-worth by the events that are occurring. Can I live, or am I living in a world of my thoughts or emotions and living in reactions? Self-responsibility is against that principle. Do I accept the role that I play in what happens to me and others? Do you accept the role that everything that is occurring around you is your creation? If your business is not ready to innovate yourself out of this mess, it's your creation. You haven't created the structure. If you as a person are losing your job today, it's your creation. If you were good enough to come up with an innovative idea to save your company, you'll have a job. But you're not, because you've lived in a certain world of your creation. Do I accept the role that whatever is happening to me or to people around me or to my family or to my ecosystem is my creation? Unless you accept, there's nothing to adapt to. Unless you adapt to, there is no brilliance that's going to emerge. Accept the role. And if you don't accept it, you're plain simply deceiving yourself. Once you accept it, how can I face life head on and not hide from what it is? The crisis is upon us. The business reality that it doesn't exist is upon us. Now, can I take it head on? Which means, can I find a way to come up with a solution on top of this rather than hide behind this and create excuses that the business is going to be bad this year. This year has just begun. 52 weeks. We can't be sitting in a doom cycle of 52 weeks. You have 52 weeks to make it work for you, and you will only make it work for you once you accept that you have a role in where you are today and you can do something about it to change it. And that needs courage, and that's the courage we need, not the fear of the doom. And my last question for self-responsibility for you is this: how can I ensure I don't deceive myself, especially when it hurts to do so? If I accept responsibility, I stand there alone taking care of thousands of people who might be looking up on me. And that's courage. And that courage is brilliance. The reason is this: most people in this cycle, the cycle will come and go. Economy will go down and revive back again. But the courage, there'll be very few people who'll come to this stage where they will question and ask themselves, how am I responsible for the current situation? There'll be even fewer people who will say, yes, I am responsible for the current situation. After having done that, there'll be even fewer people who, after taking responsibility, will try and take some action to adapt and change the situation for people around them. It is those people, and it is those few people who are the brilliant minds who will be coming up with, or at least coming up with efforts that are brilliant enough to change the worldview. And the way to get to that worldview is this list of questions. Who controls who you are? Is the situation controlling you, or can you control yourself? Who's controlling your self-worth? Is it getting defined by an idea, by a wealth which no longer exists, by a business, the brand of which is dead? Or is it going to be defined by the value you create? And how can you ensure you don't deceive yourself when it hurts? It will hurt you to take responsibility, but unless you do, adaptability is not going to come upon. I'm going to sum up these 5 questions that we went through. Self-identity. What defines your attention? What makes you unique? And the quantum science tells us what needs to make you unique is the value you provide. The self of competence doesn't need to be what do I get, but what do I give. Value is to create your value that you will get is from the contribution of value that you make to people to change the energy. By changing the energy, you're not judging it to be good, bad, happy or sad. It's just energy. Your self-worth is not determined by what that energy is or what people think of you. But when you take responsibility and control what you feel or control who you are, whether it's good, bad, happy or sad, and you take actions to adapt, to create and change the worldview, and you can change the worldview because in quantum energy, everyone's connected. So if you change one, it has an effect on the other. And this is how it all comes together. This is how one thing affects the other. Your self-identity teaches you to see things. If my self-identity is lost in things and questions of success, then even in the current situation, I'm seeing that. If I change the sense of identity to value, I'll be forced to see what value can be created today. When I see value, because of the structure of things, that value is getting communicated to everybody. Competence traditionally, or your knowledge, makes you act. If I see my competence today in acquiring things or in solving a process act or in keeping cash intact, I act like that. But if I see differently, if I see that I have to provide value, now I tap into creating that value, and that's the competence that I will act on. And that action of creating value spreads an effect to a larger mass of your quantum structure, and your self-value then comes from value that you've created by others. And when you start to feel that as a sense of value, that's the sense in very modern day terms when things tend to go viral. I create value for you, for example, today in teaching you a course, and we're not charging for it or anything, and we're getting 500 to 1,000 people every single webinar. We create that value. We didn't know that we'll get these many people. Now, right after the webinar, some people tend to write back to us, and we see the effect that it has on people. What does it do for us? It doesn't make any money for us. It doesn't give us a sense of success or something. But for the next webinar, our little team of people who are now more energized than ever to work is even more energized to create better value next time. We don't know what it will lead to or whether people are getting impacted or not, but we getting energized by the value, and that's the effect of the value, that it spreads. It creates more energy, and it creates energy even to an extent where you're creating even better things, and it kind of forms a chain reaction. We have far more people joined into the Rise My India mission today than when we started 3 weeks back. It's just a chain reaction simply coming through together by the way of creating value. Value comes with responsibility. When you are the creator, you have the responsibility to not just create value for yourself, but to the whole. Change in this system is not an effort. I'll share a very personal story with you. About a month or 2 months back, before the start of coronavirus, as a team, I'd been away for a couple of months, off and on, in office, not in office. We were struggling as a team to define a purpose for us or to come together to create some sort of strategy. Today, from that position to where the whole team is bounded together to create all this for you, that change hasn't even taken an effort. And that's what happens in a quantum kind of a world. The change does not take an effort because the paradigm shifts. The paradigm today is, how do I change this mood in people? And that change doesn't take an effort. And not only that, that order of that change is in self-organizing. Everyone self-organizes themselves to do their bits, and that's like a self-transformation. And action is not a result of an effect. Action is a result of what we were discussing earlier of seeing. I see this is wrong about what people are doing. I see that this is wrong in the way people are behaving. I must act to change it. I must adapt to change it. It's not an effect. There is no cause. It's just an action. And all of this combined together creates its own language, which is energy, where you don't need to communicate all this. You set this in motion, that I see, I act, I create an effect, and there's a chain reaction. I think of the whole, I create value. Change is happening, order is forming, action is happening. All of this system generates energy, where then it has a multiplicative effect to emerge out of the situation. There is no one person who will give the idea. There's no one person who will come up with a response. There's no one person who will get the credit. Please remember that. There's no one person who will generate value. But a combination of this quantum energy will generate for you the brilliance that is needed in today's times. And I cannot stress that enough. I know I've gone fast. I had a lot of content to cover, but this recording is going to be made available to you. Watch it again. Listen to it again. Go through the questions first for yourself, then with your team, with your families. Answer each and every one of them. Come to this last slide that I showed you, and come to see how you will create this multiplicative effect where everyone is coming together, where everyone is contributing into a dialogue that's focused on the positive future, not on a dialogue that's focused on preservation, because it's not scalable. What is scalable is brilliance. If you create this structure where everyone is seeing something else, acting on something else, and creating an effective chain reaction without wanting credit for it, you create a structure of brilliance, of transformation, because it's already created a different paradigm. I'm going to put this summary slide on. There is a doom cycle that we all have got ourselves into. The loss, shock, denial, anger, sadness. Majority of us has accepted that this lockdown and the emergence of situations from it is going to be the reality. There is a whole majority of us which is unable to adapt to that reality. And the reason they're unable to adapt from that reality is they're still lost in the paradigms of self-identity and self-worth, which needs to be broken, even if temporarily, to get into a quantum interconnected structure. Focus the ego to the energy, and energy on coming out of the problem rather than trying to defeat the problem, because you can't. It's the same paradigm. We'll be live in a few moments to answer all your questions. Please start posting them. Can't wait to answer them. Cheers.